Hey everybody, and welcome to our trip tips for the Great Smoky Mountains National Park through outdoor adventures made easy. Our hope is that this trip guide and our trip tips video will help you plan your best family vacation to the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. So today what we're going to do is go through our trip guide and pull out some of our top trip tips for you. So let's go ahead and jump in. So right there at the beginning of the trip guide is our area map. This shows the stops that we recommend within the national park, and then also Tuckaleechee Caverns, which is just outside the national park. It also has a nearby stop, so if you're coming from the west over to the national park, we recommend that you stop at Ozone Falls. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go into more details on each of these locations and some of the tips that we have for those before you head to them. Okay, the first stop that we want to talk about is Kuwohi. This is formerly known as Clingman's Dome. So prior to European contact, the Cherokee had this area named Kuwohi. And at the Cherokee Nation's request, the National Park Service has returned that name from Clingman's Dome back to its original name, Kuwohi. So you might see some discrepancy in labeling in different apps or maps or that sort of thing. But just know that Clingman's Dome was the former name and now it is Kuwohi. So when you are going, there are a couple things to keep in mind. So the highlight of the trip, the main thing that people do is hike up to the observation tower. And so this is a half mile up, half mile back. Sounds pretty easy. It's paved the entire way. But there is a 13% grade. So you have 330 feet of elevation that you're climbing. Thankfully, there's lots of benches along the way, but I would not recommend taking strollers or wheelchairs. If you have kiddos, like a backpack carrier is going to be better. But keep in mind that although it's not a long hike, it is pretty physically taxing, but the reward is absolutely beautiful. So I would recommend hiking here on a clear day because you are able to see really, really far, up to 5 states that you can see from that location. So it's really beautiful, really cool to take in the view. Another thing to take into consideration is that the temperatures up there can vary greatly from some of the other lower hikes that you might be taking in the national park. So be sure to dress in layers and pay attention to the weather. The parking lot is pretty big. However, this is a very popular location. So parking can be a challenge. You do have to have a parking pass and you can buy them in some of the machines that they have there. But parking does turn over quite a bit while you're there. So if you can't find a spot, you might just have to take a couple laps and see if something opens up while you're there. But this is definitely a must hit while you're at the national park. Next up is Laurel Falls. So if you are hoping to do this hike during 2025 or the first part of 2026, unfortunately, the trail is closed. They are doing some massive renovation on the parking lot so that it can hold more parking spots. And then also the trail has gotten pretty rough as it was paved a long time ago, and it's really starting to fall apart and be pretty rough. So they're doing a parking lot renovation and then a trail resurfacing project. So it's planned to be closed from January of 2025 to July of 2026. So just keep an eye out for that. If you are going to the national park during that window of time that Laurel Falls is closed, you'll just have to plan a trip back because this is one of my favorite hikes there. It was 2.3 miles total, just a very beautiful scenic hike. Laurel Falls is awesome. The trail comes up and it's actually, the trail itself divides an upper and a lower falls. And so it was really fun to just explore and check out that area. Absolutely beautiful. The entire hike, there's so many beautiful views. So be sure to add that one to your list. And like I said, if you're not able to do it because it's closed, you'll just have to plan another trip back. Cataract Falls is another great stop, and this is really wonderful, especially if you have young kids. I would recommend doing this one toward the beginning of your visit because it's great to check out the Sugarland Visitor Center. which has a gift shop. It has rangers there to answer questions, and then a small little interpretive area as well. There's also about a 20-minute video that gives you more information about the park. So after you've checked out the visitor center and the bathrooms in that area, then you actually kind of go between the two, and that is the trailhead that will take you to Cataract Falls. So it's 7/10 of a mile round trip. It's very flat, easy. It's a very popular trip, so there's lots of people there, not a lot of solitude. But you'll hike back to Cataract Falls, and it's a great little hike. And like I said, pretty easy and straightforward. So a nice one to do toward the beginning of your trip, if at all possible. Cades Cove is next on our list. And if you have the time, I would allot almost an entire day just for Cades Cove. So this is an 11-mile one-way loop road. And as you're driving along the road, you can stop at all sorts of different historic cabins and check those out. Cabins and churches and all sorts of things. So this is a really neat historic area. Not a ton of hiking unless you're interested in doing that and adding that onto the trip, but a lot of really fascinating history in this area and great wildlife viewing opportunities as well. So in the trip guide, I kind of lay out some of the highlights for us and for our trip. You could stop at all of the locations, and that would be great. It would lengthen your trip, obviously. And so for me and my kids, we kind of picked out what our favorites were. And so these are our top recommendations, the ones that I would suggest that you hit while you're at Cades Cove. So here those are. The first is hiking back to the John Oliver cabin. This is a really nice short hike. It's a 1/4 mile. So it's really accessible for all ages. This was built in 1822, and it's the oldest structure in Cades Cove. There's 3 different historic churches, and they each have their own wonderful charm. So there's the Primitive Baptist Church, the Missionary Baptist Church, and the Methodist Church. So I would recommend stopping at least one of them, just in case you can't stop at all of them. We really enjoyed the hike back to the Elijah Oliver place. And so this is a 1/2 mile round trip, and you actually start at the Abrams Falls trailhead. And we really thought this one was interesting. It has a spring house where they've kind of channeled the water down to the cabin. It has a stranger room and a really cool breezeway cabin design. So lots of fascinating history. This one is a little bit more remote. So if you're looking for a place to get out and stretch your legs and check out something that there's not quite as many people at, this is a great recommendation for that. Unfortunately for us, the kids were wearing out and we didn't have enough energy. We didn't want to push it going to the Abram Falls. So this is a 5-mile round trip to a 20-foot waterfall, but beautiful, beautiful. And it's one of the most popular hikes in the national park. So that tells you that obviously it is well worth the time. So if you have the energy and are able to do that hike, I would recommend it. Again, be careful. This is a location that there have been some dangerous falls and that sort of thing there. So just be safe as you're hiking to Abram Falls. The Cable Mill Historic Area and Visitor Center is another must stop. This has a really cool old grist mill. It has a blacksmith shop. Sometimes it has live demonstrations that they have going on, and then the visitor center there as well. There's lots to see in this area, so I definitely recommend checking that one out. And last but not least is the Carter Shields cabin. This is one that's kind of on the way out. It's really secluded and beautiful, but sometimes it's passed up because people have kind of hit their limit of stops and locations, and they're ready to keep moving and head out the park. So that is another great one to check out as well. A couple things to know about the Cades Cove area is that this loop road is open 7 days a week, although they do close it to vehicular traffic one day, which allows people to bike through the area. So you can either bring your own bikes or there are some rental options available. Another thing to know is that this is a really popular wildlife viewing area. So pay attention to what other vehicles are doing. If there's quite a few vehicles stopped or pulled over, there's a good chance that they're looking at some wildlife that you might want to check out. So I would suggest bringing binoculars while you're going to Cades Cove, because you might be able to see something up a little bit closer, maybe some bears, deer, all sorts of really beautiful wildlife. So next up is the Elkmont area. So if you're planning to camp in the national park, this is my recommendation. It has the most amenities, the most spots available, and it is very scenic. It's also centrally located, so that helps as well. If you're not planning on camping, there's still lots to do in the Elkmont area. This would be a great place to have a picnic, and it's also a great place to explore. So this is the area that they've restored Daisy Town, which is several old retreat, like summer houses that they have actually restored. And there is a tour that you can check out and more information to view in that area. But our favorite part about Elkmont was actually just hiking and exploring the area. We hiked along the Little River Trail, and that is an old railroad right-of-way, so very nice, flat area there. But as you're hiking along, you'll see these old ruins from different summer cottages that were built in the 1920s. All that remains from most of them is the foundation and fireplace. Some of them still have some walls in place. But this is really neat to check out and explore. The kids just really enjoyed that. And then this is the location for the famous troll bridge that you can check out there as well. So for us and our crew, this was just a great area to not really try and get an official hike in, to just allow the kids to wander and explore that area. Next up is the Sinks. The Sinks is actually a man-made waterfall. So back in the logging era, as they would send the logs down the river, they would get jammed in this natural like horseshoe bend of the river there. And so during a flood, they were trying to float a lot of logs down, and they got jammed up in this area. And then the floodwaters receded, and they decided to blast out the log jam with dynamite. And they may have overdone it a little bit, because they actually altered the course of the river, and they created a new straight path through, so the water didn't flow through that horseshoe bend anymore. The location of the horseshoe bend is actually where the parking lot is now, and now the river flows through this really beautiful, but not natural, waterfall. And so this is a really cool, just quick stop to explore. The parking lot is very small, so if you're there on a busy like weekend or peak visitor time, the odds are pretty slim that you are going to get a parking spot there, although it is a quick stop, so it turns over pretty fast. But one thing to keep in mind is that this is a really dangerous area. There have been a lot of deaths there because people have thought it would be a great place to go swimming, and then they get sucked into that undertow current. And so for us, we just stayed really far back. We took in the view, but we didn't get anywhere near the water. So be sure that you're being safe in that area, especially if you have little ones. Another quick stop for us was Greenbrier School. So there's two ways to access that. You can either do the 1.5 mile hike, which is a very nice hike, although there is quite a bit of elevation gain. So just keep that in mind if you're hiking with young kids and you've already done a hike for the day. We opted to drive up to it, which I probably would not have done if my husband wasn't with us. We took our minivan, which I would not recommend. But this is a really narrow one vehicle road up and back. And so if you would meet someone, it would be a little bit scary. And so that's why I would just recommend hiking up to it, because I get nervous about that sort of thing. But Greenbrier School is really fascinating. It was built in 1882. And for me, the thing that was so interesting to see is just how wide the logs were, just showing how old those trees would have been when they cut them down to build Greenbrier School. So the great thing is that you can go into the schoolhouse, you can see it for yourself. It's one of the most like true roughest schoolhouses I've seen. And so that was really neat to be able to see that. And it's just a really nice, beautiful area. So you can either drive up for it if you're a little bit more of a risk taker, or hike to it and enjoy the beautiful hike there. So that wraps up all the recommended stops that I have for the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. But just outside the national park is Tuckaleechee Caverns, which is known as the greatest site under the Smokies. This was a really fun tour. This is a commercial cave tour, but we really enjoyed it. The store and visitor center area there, it seems a little bit dated and you might kind of wonder what you're getting into. But as you go on the tour, the cave itself is loaded with so many beautiful different features of that cave. So here are some of our favorites. So on the cave tour, you'll see Silver Falls. This is a 210-foot beautiful waterfall that is, it just like disappears up into the darkness. And so it's hard to really grasp just how big that waterfall is, but it really adds to its mystic character. There's also the big room, and this measures 400 feet long, 300 feet wide, and 150 feet tall. So that's larger than a football field. And just taking in its sheer size is amazing. There's also all sorts of different cave formations, stalactites, stalagmites, flow stones that are really beautiful that you're able to walk around and check out. You can actually drink from the spring in the cave, which was pretty fun for us, and the kids really enjoyed doing that. You can make a wish in the wishing well, and you can even check out a cave salamander. So they have some cave salamanders that reside in the cave there. So lots of really cool stuff to do in Tuckaleechee Caverns. It was a great stop, and it would be a great option if you were there on a rainy day and needed something else to do. Things to keep in mind while you're at Tuckaleechee Caverns is that there are a lot of steps involved, so there's no strollers or wheelchairs that are able to make the tour. If you have a kiddo, I think a small backpack carrier or front carrier would be fine. But there are a lot of steps involved, so keep that in mind. Dress warm, as all caves are cooler. And then also wear nice, sturdy footwear. So there are some, it's a cave, it's damp, it's wet. So there are some spots that could be a little bit slick. So I just recommend wearing some good, sturdy shoes or hiking boots for that cave tour. If you're coming from the west to the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, we recommend stopping at Ozone Falls. This is a nice distance from the park, so it kind of breaks up the drive a little bit, and this is absolutely beautiful. There's two ways to check out Ozone Falls. So from the very small parking lot, there's about 8 spots in that parking lot, and then there's an overflow area across the road. And so from that, you can hike right in, and you'll see the top of the falls very quickly from when you get there. If you have young kids, I would actually recommend not going to the top, because there is no actual like fencing or overlook platform or anything like that. It is just a sheer 110-foot drop. That makes me really nervous as a parent. So we opted to actually skip that part and then just hike directly down to the bottom of Ozone Falls. And so you just kind of hike along the cliff side as it descends down into the base of the falls. On the way down to the base of the falls, you'll pass Gambler's Den, which is a fun little thing to check out and explore. But there at the bottom, there's a lot to just take in the beauty of this area. It's nice and cool down there. So if you are hiking on a warm summer day, you'll definitely feel that temperature change as you go down. If you're hiking on a cool day, no matter what, then definitely bring an extra layer. But Ozone Falls is a great nearby stop, especially if you're coming from the west. Okay, where to stay? This question is so hard because everybody has all sorts of different preferences and accommodations that they like to have. But we always try and recommend a campground. So in this case, we recommend Elkmont Campground. This has 200 tent and RV sites and then 20 walk-in sites. So if you'd like to be a little bit more secluded from everybody else, there are some options as well. Especially in the peak season, this is a very busy campground, so be sure to make your reservations ahead of time. If camping is not quite your jam, or you're traveling far enough that you want to make sure that you have a great home base to work off of, then there's tons of VRBOs and Airbnbs. Gatlinburg is definitely the more commercial side of the Smokies. So we enjoy staying in Townsend, which is known as the peaceful side of the Smokies. And so we included information for different places to stay in Townsend. In the trip guide, we also included our car camping packing list, as we do with all of our trip guides, in case you want to work off of that as you're packing for some camping. But overall, we just hope that you really enjoy and that this trip guide is helpful for you as you are planning your next trip to the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. We really enjoyed our time there as a family, and we hope that you do as well.